Yo, what's going on? So as you can see, I've got a pretty small setup in front of me again, which is just the iPad, not including the turntable. That's how I'm going to sample, but you can sample from anything. So this is one of the smallest setups I ever use, and I did a video a while back when I tested out Andrew Wong's Flip Sampler, which you can check out right here. But in that video, someone had commented about another sampler app that was available that I had never heard of, and that is Koala Sampler. So shout out for the comment, thank you so much. I went and checked that out, and we're gonna make a beat on that right now. This is gonna be the first full beat I've ever done on this app. I've never done a beat on it before, but I learned how it works, and it's pretty impressive. One of the things I talked about in terms of the Flip Sampler is it was really great in terms of melodic samples, but when it came to actually chopping beats in a more traditional sense of taking a sample off of some vinyl, let's say, and then chopping that into different regions, that's just not really what it was made to do. It was more so made for those melodic samples and playing samples melodically. But the Koala Sampler, I think, is way more geared towards that more chopping style of sample music. And the first thing I just have to give a shout out to is I love how you can change the background on the app. I've got these sort of leaves, and it just lets you set the vibe a little bit. Even though it's just sort of an aesthetic thing, I'm really into it, and I think it kind of can be inspiring, and it's just a really easy and fun way to make it your own, similar to you would like an SP404 where you can change the faceplate. This, within seconds, you can just change what the app looks like, which is pretty sweet. So to start us off, I'm just going to record a sample into the app, and I have the turntable plugged directly into the iPad. The record that we're going to be sampling today is this record by The Moments. It's called Look At Me, and the song that we're going to be sampling is When the Morning Comes. This is amazing music. The Moments are incredible, and you should definitely check out The Moments, and they've been sampled a ton. And I actually wanted to just give a quick shout out to another Moments record that I have, just because it has one of my favorite samples on it of all time and one of my favorite songs of all time just to vibe to. It's on this record On Top by The Moments, and the song is To You With Love. It's a sample from Last Donut of the Night off Donuts, J Dilla, legendary music obviously, but it's just one of my favorite samples and songs ever. So I just wanted to give a shout out since we're going to be sampling The Moments in this track. So in order to sample into this app, however you have your audio input set up, once you press a pad down, it's going to start recording. So I'll hold down the pad, hit play on the turntable, and then we'll record in our sample. Unfortunately, we won't be able to hear it while it's recording because it only has one jack on the iPad. I wish I could sort of monitor it while it was happening, and I'm sure I could get a splitter or something that would do that, but we'll just go without hearing it, and then we can listen to it back after it's recorded. Let's do it. Okay, so we now have that sample loaded up onto the first pad, and you can see that there's a waveform on the first pad right here. So once you click that pad and press edit, it will show you the waveform up at the top of the app as well. And so the first thing I'm going to do is just trim out that first little bit of silence and any part of the sample that we don't want to use for the beat, and then we can crop that and start making our chops. Let's do it. So I've now cropped out that first part of the sample that we don't need for the beat, and I can now move forward with chopping our sample into different regions across the pads. I find that the workflow in terms of chopping on this app is very similar to an SP404 in the sense that you kind of just want to keep copying your sample and moving the start point to where you want your sample to start. The one thing I would recommend though is that you try to set your volume and pitch levels before copying it to the next pad, because otherwise if you want to make a change to the volume or pitch, you'll have to go back and change every single pad individually. Whereas if I change the first pad, it will automatically change them for all the ones that I copy over. So I'm going to pitch up this sample a little bit and speed it up, and I'll turn it down a little bit as well. And then we can copy that over and start making our chops. I like that speed. So now to copy that over, I just hold on the sample and drag it over to the second pad, and now there it is again. So then we'll just zoom in, move our start point to wherever we want our second chop to be, and I'll just do the rest of the pads. You don't have to watch me do that. Let's do it. Okay, I now have all those chops created, and I did kind of a BPM chop with just a kick and snare, pretty typical way to chop. But by default, all of the samples are in gated mode, meaning they'll only play while I'm holding down the pad. With these melodic samples, I want to turn them to one shot so that when I hit them, they just start playing all the way through. I don't have to hold my finger down. But I want to put all the samples into the same mute group. That way, when I play the next one, it's going to cut off the previous, and I won't have multiple samples playing at the same time. So I'll put all the samples onto one shot mode and then put them all into mute group 1. Let's do it. I'm not sure how to select multiple samples and edit them all at the same time, but if there's a way to do that and you know how to do that, leave it down in the comments because I'd love to figure that out. Okay, so I now have all those chops in the same mute group and I have them all in one-shot mode. So if I go to the sequence tab on the app, I can now start playing around with the samples and trying to figure out a pattern. And while I'm hitting the pads, I'm also going to try to figure out what the BPM is. So I'll get that set up and then we can try to come up with a chop and lay it down. And then we'll try to get a beat together. Let's do it. To record a pattern, you just press the record button and then it'll start counting us in. I would say one of the biggest sort of setbacks of this app is the sequence editor, because once I lay down a pattern, unless I want to upgrade the app, I won't be able to actually go back and make changes to it. I would just have to re-record. And they do offer, it seems like, a more updated version where you can go in and actually see more of like a DAW style where you can see each of the MIDI notes. But with this one, you just lay down the sequence and then that's what you're going to end up with. And again, it really feels like an SP404 work style. And I mean more of the older SP404s where you're resampling, and if you want to make a change, you kind of just have to re-record. So let's lay down a pattern, see what we can come up with, and then we'll start laying down more elements onto this beat. Let's do it. So now I'm going to load up some drum sounds, and luckily I already have some drum sounds saved on my iPad. So I'm going to go to a blank page, and then in terms of the input method, rather than mic, I'm going to import file. And then when I click on a blank pad, it will automatically bring up my files from my iPad. So I can now load up some kicks, hi-hats, snares, and we can add a drum beat on top of this. So I've got all my drums loaded up onto the app, but I want to have some variation in velocity when it comes to the hi-hat. So in order to do that, I can just copy the hi-hat sound onto a second pad and then lower the volume. That way I can kind of go between the two and it would sound something like this. So let's lay that on top of the beat and then we can add in the kick and snare as well. Let's do it. Okay, I think this beat is coming together pretty well so far. The one thing I just want to show as well that you can do on this app in terms of samples is, even though we can't do any sort of side chaining or anything like that, you do have the option to edit the envelope of your samples. So you can change the attack or release as well as the filter. It's called tone, but it's sort of like a filter. So if we wanted to have sort of like a side chaining sound, we could increase the attack on some of the samples, and then that will give it sort of like this ramping up effect when it comes to actually how it plays. So here's how the sample sounds right now. But as we raise the attack, rather than it just hitting right on, the volume just sort of ramps up as we hit the sample. I'll show you what I mean. So by doing something like that and raising the attack, you can make it sound almost like the kick is side chaining the sample. Now that we added attack to that sample, here's how it sounds with the full sequence. It's just a cool way to kind of give it a little bit more of a texture, and you don't always need the most equipment in order to get that professional sound, that polished sound. You just need to know where you want to make changes in order to give it certain sort of styles. So I think we have a good main sequence for this beat. I'm going to make another sequence just so we have another pattern in this beat and it's not just a 2-bar loop. So let's lay down another sample chop. We'll add drums on top of that again, and then we can have a bit more of a full beat here. And you notice when I lay down this beat, I turned up the attack on all of those samples that start with the kick. So similar to the house chopping beat I did right here, all of the samples in these two columns are going to be kicks. All of the samples in these are going to be snares. And because I wanted to kind of have a little bit of a kick sidechain sound, all of the kick samples, I added a bit more of attack on those so we get that ramped up sound. So let's record the next sequence and then we'll put some drums on top. Let's do it. Okay, I think this beat's in a pretty good spot, and I think we can add in some bass. One thing you can do on this app as well is play samples melodically. So I'll upload a bass sample, we'll add that to the beat. To start, I'm going to record the bass pretty loudly just so I can ensure I hear the notes that I'm recording. Once they're actually laid down, I'll lower that volume a little bit, and I'll probably put a low pass filter on that as well. Let's do it. So I think that wraps it up for this beat, but the last thing I want to show on this app is the performance options that you have. So if you go to perform on this app, it gives you a lot of different effects that you can apply while a beat is playing. So it gives you like a stutter effect, a filter, and it even does have like a compressor, talk box, and all of these things. Again, this app was about $7, I think. So it's definitely, if you have an iPad or an iPhone, it also works on Android devices. It's the cheapest sequencer you can get, and it actually has a ton of capabilities for the price. But I'm now going to play the beat, just mess around with the performance features a little bit, and you can kind of see how it works. But I hope you like how the beat turned out, and if you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments what you want to see in a future video. Love you guys so much. Thank you for hanging out. Appreciate you. Peace. I can only wait to see the